My name is Camille Rosenthal, and I played Anne Frank. It definitely changed my perspective a lot because I'm Jewish, and I've grown up Jewish. I've grown up hearing about Anne Frank, hearing about the Holocaust and all these stories, and to me, it's almost become normalized hearing about it over and over. So to be able to actually play these characters, see them come to life, get to know them more, it really kind of emphasized to me that these were real people, they had real goals, real aspirations, and it just kind of like brought them to life. It just made it seem like these are only two families and so much happened to them, and then you think about that it happened to 6 million people.
I'm Ella Williams. I played Margot Frank. The scene between Anna and Margot on the bed after they thought that they had a chance of going back to school and going back to their lives, because seeing that really deep sisterly bond and just the immense hope that emerged in that moment after such a dark and, devastating time, it just made the scene so meaningful to me, and I think it made that ending even more devastating, just knowing that there was this moment of immense hope, and then it ended up being so devastating. But it's also a really, I think, just beautiful moment to see the hope that they could have in such dark times.
Hi, my name is Frankie Bancroft, and I played Otto Frank. The scene in the play that was most meaningful to me is probably the Hanukkah scene. In the scene, basically, Anne and her family and the Fondans and Mr. Dussel, they celebrate Hanukkah. And the reason why it's the most meaningful to me is because it's one of the more lighter tone parts of the show, one of the more happier parts of the show. And that's truly inspiring to me because it shows how everyone in the annex was still able to find moments of joy and happiness and normalcy despite all of the horrible things going on around them. And it also shows just how giving and thoughtful and kind of a person Anne was, because she made gifts from scratch for everyone, and they're all very personalized, and the way that everyone really reacted to their gifts, and they're just so grateful to Anne. It was really just a sweet moment of the show.
My name is Carolyn Falk, and I played Person 3, and I understudied for Anne Frank, Margot, and me. It was very emotionally challenging because these characters, they went through so much, and I think that realizing that they were real people and not just characters that we were playing had a big toll on it. And they did go through a lot, and really respecting that and showing that in the show, I think was a big part of it, and making them more than just characters, really emphasizing the fact that they were people who actually went through this, and there was more than just them.
Hi, my name's Amelie Bass, and I played Edith Frank. There were many emotional moments when taking on this character. I could really tell how Edith struggled with a lot of anxiety, understandable given her situation, but I could really see how caring she was. She was a mother of 2 daughters who she loved, and there were definitely struggles, but she leaned on her husband for support. And I could really tell how she wanted the best for everyone around her. She held in her emotions, which I could relate to because she wanted to protect those around her, but I could see that in reality, it's okay to let out your emotions and care for everyone else at the same time. And I really learned from this experience that you have to make the most of every moment. Every day is important, and you can never tell what the future holds.
Hi, I'm Jake Brown, and I played Peter Van Don in The Diary of Anne Frank. I think one of the most meaningful scenes, and the scene that we kind of had the most struggle with during the rehearsal process, was the bread scene. It was such a memorable scene because I got to watch this scene kind of grow into what it became for the final performance. It was really interesting to watch how the scene developed and grew over time. At first it was really tough for us to get some of the lines down, to get some of the pacing correctly, but as we kept running it and over, we just kept repeating it, and it became really, really beautiful and really fun to act in and be in, even though I said one line. So that was really, it felt really good to finally see that everything, come together. The scene itself is a very frantic and chaotic and a scene that's really, fast-paced. And in the beginning stages of our rehearsal process, that wasn't really clicking with us as a group of actors and performers. And so with notes and guidance, we had to pick up the pace a lot. We had to have the lines perfectly fall on top of one another in a certain way that presented this illusion of chaos and franticness and discomfort to the audience, because it was a very emotional and chaotic scene, in the play and in the book. So we had to do our best to kind of present that, and it wasn't easy in the beginning. Nothing is ever easy, but it was all able to come together. We just had to rehearse it many times and really give in to each and every one of those characters, what they were feeling towards one another, and how they really expressed their emotions throughout that scene.
My name is Connor Bowden, and I played Mr. Crawler in The Diary of Anne Frank. In 7th grade, I did read The Diary of Anne Frank, and back then, reading it as more of a novel made it have a very flat perspective. I wasn't able to connect with the show as much as I was able to when I put on the role of Mr. Crawler and was able to add acting choices and connect with the other actors on the stage.
Hi, my name is Leo Schmidt, and I played Mr. Dussel. I'd say it's pretty nerve-wracking before the show begins, especially for my character, who doesn't come on until halfway through. But I think the thing that I keep in mind is that these characters were terrified when they were about to go into the annex, but as time went on, they began to get to know each other and they felt more comfortable. And so as me as an actor, I also feel more comfortable as the play goes on. And I think keeping in mind the people in the annex were also terrified, but they were also really nervous is a good character thing to keep in mind while I'm on stage.
My name is Jack Elliott, and I played the part of Mr. Fondant. At the beginning of this production, you asked us to do research on our characters, and I found out a lot about Mr. Fondant. He met the Franks when he moved, and he became close friends with Mr. Frank because he helped him acclimate to the new area. And something that you wouldn't know about him from reading the book is he was considered the jokester of the annex, and he's often painted in a really negative light, but he was considered the funny guy around there, and he brought a lot of levity to a very dark time, and I thought that was really interesting learning about him. It was just staying in that mindset 100% of the time on stage, and I don't think it was necessarily difficult to get in that mindset once we were up on stage, because just the atmosphere of always being up there was exhausting, and it really helped to replicate that feeling, but it was very difficult to do day in and day out, and it's only a fraction of what they experienced, so I can only imagine what that must have been like, but it was just a very powerful experience.
I'm Tatiana Correa, and I played Mrs. Von Don. The coat scene at the beginning of Act 2, where Mr. Von Don pressures his wife into giving him her coat so they can sell it for more money. It's such a powerful scene, because here, Mrs. Von Don has this coat. She's had it for 17 years. Her father gave it to her right before he died. This coat is the last memory she has of a time before everything went wrong, of a happier time and of a kinder place. And it's just so striking and horrible to see what happens. After rehearsal every day, I literally leave and be like, guys, do you think we're living up to what these people were really like, or are we filling little boxes that aren't what these people actually were like? Because I spent a lot of time thinking about how this is Anne's interpretation. So a 13-year-old's opinion on especially somebody like Mrs. Von Don was different probably than what she actually was like. So I was always worried that I was going to portray Mrs. Von Don as this woman who was maybe a little rude and selfish. But I even think that even in Anne's writing, in some of those moments, you could tell that she thought that Mrs. Von Don was a genuine person. And it was just so scary for me to live up to that. But during the show, when we all got together before the opening night, and we did this counting thing we did, I felt all of that worry disappear, because it felt like one big family.
My name is Eva Achternacht, and I played Miep Kies. It was really emotional. It was hard not to be really depressed from it, because it was really emotional and sad. When we did our first read through, then I just wanted to hug everybody, because it was really sad, and it wasn't that long ago even. My grandma was alive. It was really emotional in the part where Mr. Dussel first comes to the annex and he's telling them about what's happening to their friends and to Yopi, and it made me feel really emotional. Or another part was the first time when we did the liberation scene, and it was the real broadcast from Eisenhower that made me get like teary-eyed. In middle school, we read the 1954 version by Francis Goodrich and Albert Hackett, and this year we performed the 1997 version adapted by Wendy Kesselman. In the 1950s version, the writers weren't Jewish, and they thought that if the characters were too Jewish, then the audience wouldn't sympathize with them. So they changed a lot of things, and like in the Hanukkah scene, they made it like a made-up song, but in the 1997 version, then they sang Ma'oz Tzor, the traditional Hebrew Hanukkah song. Or like in the end monologue in the 1950s version, Anne says that all people have had to suffer at some point, but then the quote that it's based on, she says that Jewish people have had to suffer, but she knows it will be okay because God won't abandon his people. But they changed stuff in the original version, but they added it back in the 1990s version, so it's more accurate.
My name is Andrew King. I played Person 1, and I understudied Otto Frank and Mr. Von Don. The most challenging part for me was definitely having to actually wear the armband, because that, I don't know how to describe it, but when I was wearing it, it put me in like a mental state that I just hated myself when I was wearing that armband, because it symbolizes something so terrible that I couldn't stand wearing it.
This is obviously a very painful show in particular. There are highs where they're hopeful and joyful, and then there are really low lows where just everything kind of comes out. So it's an extremely painful play to act through, but it's also incredibly beautiful in the small moments that are exchanged between characters with hope and joy.
I think the most challenging part was letting myself be vulnerable and express these emotions, but I was lucky enough to have such an amazing cast and crew that were so supportive, and it really let myself be vulnerable and truly express what these people went through, and that was a really special experience.
I believe it was very important to tell the story because we need to know these things so they don't repeat themselves. We need to know these things so people don't forget how horrible a human can be and what horrible things have happened throughout history to people that this never should have happened to. And I just believe that this is a story everyone should know. I had family that had never read The Diary of Anne Frank, and they don't know what happened. And they came and saw the show and they just were blown away by it. They had no idea that this heartbreaking, truthful story could have been told by a 13-year-old.
Out of all the shows I've ever been a part of, this one was the most emotional. Every day after rehearsal, I would have to take time to decompress with my friends and with myself and realize that this story, no matter how dark, had to be told.
It's important to tell this story because it brings humanization into all of the characters, so you can actually see how it affected these people, and they really were they were really nice to each other. They were great people. They had their flaws, but everyone has flaws, and this should never have happened, and we can't let it ever happen again.
It definitely was very emotional portraying these characters. Being in the show made everyone in the annex a lot more real, and it really took them off the page. And being these characters and imagining them in the situations that they had to face with these real people with their flaws and their imperfections and their hopes and dreams. It really just made everything feel a lot more horrible and a lot more heavy. So being these characters definitely was emotional. I think the hardest part for me was probably my final monologue, where I basically just describe what happens to everyone after they're captured, and the things that I describe are just very, very horrible. So getting the courage, building up that courage to be able to do it for even the people in the cast took a really long time, and it definitely took a lot of just practice and bonding with the people in the cast to build up the courage to be able to do that.
It's important to honor the memories of these people and to ensure that individual stories are told so that we can ensure, raise awareness and ensure that things like this don't happen again, just to be able to see the impact that they have on individuals and just the devastation and destruction that it brings.
Being respectful and aware that everyone has their own issues and problems, and in this case it was religion. They had lots of religious discrimination against them, and I think just being aware and open that people have struggles and people go through stuff is a really important thing, and that these were really real people who had to deal with this every day for years, and it was a really hard thing to go through.
I think for a play with such a dark ending, there's a lot of moments of joy and humor in it, and the thing I'd like audiences to keep in mind is that to try to find the light in dark situations.
In the course of history, there have been some horrible things, and this is one of them, and the way to teach people about it is to tell people about it and to educate people. And through theater and other such mediums, that's the strongest way to do it.
I think the most important reason to tell a story like this is so nothing like what happened ever happens again, because there will always be bad people out there, but as long as we as a world know what has happened in the past and know not to replicate it, and we keep telling stories like this to spread that message, then things will always be a little brighter.